Hi, Gabby. Welcome to the Nourished Child podcast.
Hi, Jill.
It's
I'm
great
really
to
excited to be here.
it's great to have you here, and we have met in the past, and you were telling me a really fun story about meeting at the Food and Nutrition Conference and Expo last October, and I have actually seen your work online and know that you are a terrific writer
Oh,
and
thank you.
also a celiac disease expert.
Yes.
And tell us a little bit about, as a registered dietitian, how you got into working with kids who have celiac disease.
Yes. So there is a story attached to this, as there often is. So my daughter, Charlotte, was actually diagnosed with celiac disease in 2022, and she was 4 years old at the time. And so she was the first one in my family to be diagnosed. So I still remember viewing the results on my Mercy Hospital app and just being kind of shocked. But she had complained of stomach pain since the age of about 2 years old. And she would complain of her stomach pain like multiple times a day.
Mm,
And so I remember thinking, whatever she's allergic to, it's in a lot of foods.
yeah.
And so the only thing I knew to do at the time on my own was to switch her to lactose free milk, which helped a little bit with her symptoms.
Mhm.
But I noticed that it just still continued. And so
Uh-huh.
she not only had stomach pain, but she had like strangely colored stools. I
Mm,
mean, like bright green
mm,
and pale white. And to be honest, taking her to the doctor and calling the nurses' lines for these things wasn't all that helpful to me. It was really hard to get doctors to take it seriously. And it could be because she didn't have a laundry list of symptoms,
uh-huh.
but I did push more for a gastroenterology referral, and I finally got one. And he decided to do an ultrasound and an X-ray, and they didn't find anything at the time. And he actually said to me, maybe her stomach pain is anxiety.
Mm,
And there's no way. I thought, my child, she really is not an anxious child. Like I know her.
yeah.
So thankfully, he said, well, let's do an upper endoscopy. It'll help us better figure out what's going on. And at the same time, while she's under anesthesia, we can do blood work. And so I was really surprised to discover, yes, it was celiac disease. And it also explained why she had lactose intolerance.
Hmm.
She had iron deficiency anemia.
Mm,
Well, her intestines were at the beginning stages of damage, to which
mm,
she wasn't producing higher levels of lactase, the enzyme, and then she wasn't able to absorb her iron. And
yeah.
so we actually caught it early,
Mm,
thank God. And the doctor kind of mentioned, if we hadn't caught it early, around second grade, she would have had more problems.
yeah. So for listeners who, are mostly parents uh, on this show and some professionals, can you explain what celiac disease is and how it might differ from a wheat allergy or even gluten intolerance?
Yeah, that's a great question. So, celiac disease can be mistaken for food allergy, but they're two different medical conditions entirely. So, celiac disease is an autoimmune condition where gluten, which is a protein found in food, is the known trigger. It actually is the only autoimmune disease that has a known trigger. So, when a child with celiac disease eats a food that contains gluten, let's say it's a cookie or pasta or bread, the body identifies gluten as an intruder and
Uh-huh,
attacks it, which causes damage to the small intestines.
uh-huh.
So the intestines are lined with what we call villi, which are these like finger like projections, and they're responsible for nutrient absorption. So if you imagine like a plush, shaggy carpet That's kind of like what these villi are. And so when they're damaged, these villi kind of start flattening out. So
Mhm.
now imagine like a linoleum floor. And so there's this inability to absorb nutrients efficiently, which can lead to deficiencies, developmental issues, and a lot more too.
Mhm.
So that's celiac disease. And it runs in families. So there is a
Okay.
genetic component to that.
Yeah.
Yes. So gluten intolerance is also known as non celiac gluten sensitivity. And it's a condition where gluten does trigger symptoms, but they're not damaging to the intestines like we do see in celiac disease. But the symptoms can definitely be similar.
So you don't have the shag carpet turning into linoleum with a gluten
Yes.
intolerance, but you might
Yes.
have the stomach pain. You might have
Yes.
some of the other symptoms that we'll talk about here next. Okay.
Yes. Correct. And there's inflammation there as well.
Okay.
So when a child does have a wheat allergy, so when they eat wheat, their body's IgE antibodies do recognize it as a threat and triggers a reaction that can cause symptoms like we see, like hives, could be shortness of breath. But a child with a wheat allergy can still eat gluten containing foods. They just have to be wheat free. So gluten
Mhm.
is found in wheat, barley, rye, and some oats.
Mhm. Yes. Very interesting. And so it sounds like there can be a variety of symptoms that you can experience with each, celiac, wheat allergy, gluten intolerance. But when we're talking about celiac, and I really want to hone in on that disorder because I think there are a lot of myths that surround celiac, and we can talk about those maybe a little bit later. But when we're talking about the symptoms, so I was trained as a pediatric dietitian and we were trained in celiac disease and it was always, the distended large belly was a classic common sign. Can you help the listeners understand what the common symptoms of celiac disease are and how those might change as children get older?
Yeah, great question. So it's funny with celiac disease. There are actually over 250 symptoms associated, so it can be very tricky to pinpoint. It's often called like a chameleon. So some common symptoms are low appetite, gas, poor growth in children, diarrhea, vomiting, constipation, pale stools, belly pain, and then that swollen belly that you spoke of. So other symptoms include fatigue. You'll see iron deficiency anemia, skin rashes, even the teeth can present with damage or discolored tooth enamel. And there even can be neurological symptoms, so ADHD, ataxia, depression. However, the neurological symptoms are more commonly seen in adults.
Mhm.
And symptoms can vary with age. So you
Yeah.
might have younger kids who get more irritability,
Mhm.
then you might have older kids who experience delayed puberty. And
Mm.
so older children may already present with autoimmune diagnoses like type 1 diabetes or autoimmune thyroid disease, which would increase the risk for celiac disease in their future.
Mhm.
So, for kids with celiac disease, the later the age of diagnosis, the greater the chance of developing another autoimmune disorder.
Mhm. That's incredible, really, because there's so many autoimmune disorders out there that seem to be, again, a chameleon of symptoms and really hard to pin down. Growth failure is a big one,
Yes.
and children don't grow in height as well. They may or may not have problems with weight gain, but they oftentimes experience delays in their potential for height growth.
Yes.
What are some of the long-term implications if a child is not picked up as having celiac disease and they may have these super subtle symptoms, but what if it never gets diagnosed? Does it progressively get worse? Are there medical complications long term? What are we looking at?
Yeah, early diagnosis is so critical. And that's because if it does go along untreated, there are a whole host of very serious complications for kiddos and for their future. So we might see osteoporosis or osteopenia, gallbladder issues, heart disease, infertility and miscarriage as well, lactose intolerance, of course, and iron deficiency anemia, malnutrition, those neurological symptoms that I kind of mentioned earlier, which could also include dementia, seizures, um, small intestinal cancer, non
Yeah.
Hodgkin lymphoma, more vitamin and mineral deficiencies, liver failure, pancreatic insufficiency, even. So there are a lot of things that can come with untreated celiac disease.
Do you happen to know the percentage of children who live with celiac disease? What's the prevalence rate?
That's a great question. I'm not sure of that answer, but I know it's about 1 in 100 diagnoses for
Okay.
people right now. There are a lot of people that are not diagnosed, a lot of kids and adults that are walking around undiagnosed because many don't have symptoms.
Mm,
So that's a huge problem too.
mm. Yeah, I mean, if you're not having symptoms, how you wouldn't think that anything was wrong.
Exactly, exactly. So you often see children and families that do present with some symptoms, and then everybody else is tested. All their siblings are tested because they need to be, since it does run in families. Then you'll have siblings who test positive for celiac disease, but they were asymptomatic.
Hmm. You know, the other thing I think that people find super confusing about celiac is this reality that you can have diarrhea as a symptom, but you can also have constipation as a symptom. And because those are so polar opposite, I think it's very confusing for people to pick it up as like, I don't think that people generally think that constipation can be a symptom of celiac disease. Can you dive into that a little bit?
Yeah, you dive into like the differences there for families looking for those symptoms. That's a really great question. And I would answer with saying that in celiac disease, we do see problems of the gut. And so we see bacterial imbalances. And so
Uh-huh.
you might have someone who presents with a gut that has a dysbiosis. So they might have more flora that are inflammatory versus like the healthy gut bugs that we would like to see.
Uh-huh.
You also have leaky gut issues where you have toxins, different things that can release into the bloodstream. And so this kind of imbalance in the gut can cause and create different symptoms like diarrhea, like constipation, and everybody's going to have a different balance of what that looks like. So
Yeah.
I would say that's probably why.
Yeah. Yeah. What are, so say a parent is out there listening to this show and they're like, huh, I wonder if my child has celiac. How would they go about looking for a diagnosis? And what are sort of the guidelines right now for diagnosing celiac disease in kids?
Yes. So a parent would want to get a referral from their pediatrician to see a gastroenterologist. And the way celiac disease is diagnosed is through blood work and an intestinal biopsy. So, for most diagnoses, both are required. However, some blood tests may come back so high that a biopsy could be a personal choice at that point. If a parent wants to know, like, what is the level of damage to the intestines that they're dealing with? So, it's important to know as well that children must be eating gluten to be tested for celiac disease, or the test results can be inaccurate. So, before parents do anything, if they do suspect that their child could have it, they need to continue to feed their child until the testing is complete.
Mhm. So, a blood test, first and foremost. And that
Yes.
sounds like it's a pretty good indicator.
Yes.
If a blood test comes back with zero, say the result is very, very low,
Yeah.
could a child still have celiac?
That's a great question. So, I would say the next step would be if they still suspect that they might be at risk, they would probably need to get genetic testing
Mhm,
done to know if they even have the genes that are specific to celiac disease. Because maybe they do have the genes and maybe they test negative for celiac disease because it's just not present at the moment.
mhm.
Something hasn't triggered the disease process to happen yet. And so they could have celiac disease in their future.
Got it.
Yes. And just because, and I'll clarify too, just because somebody has the genes associated with celiac disease does not mean they will go on to develop it. They might
Okay.
not.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah. So let's say a child gets diagnosed
Mm.
with celiac.
Yeah.
What does a parent do next?
Yes. So the next thing to do is to take a deep breath because any new diagnosis is overwhelming, especially when it's your child or teen. But things do get easier over time. And so the next step I would say after that is to make a decision on whether or not your home will be a 100% gluten free home or a shared kitchen. And that all depends on your family.
Mhm,
And so then you would need to take the necessary steps to remove the gluten from your home. If gluten will remain in your home, really just having that discussion with your family on safety precautions. It might be certain parts of your kitchen that need to be like dedicated spaces. It might be different colored cutting boards specific to that child who is gluten free. And then really trying to find and establish some support systems, whether
mhm,
they're local or virtual, because this diagnosis can be very challenging
mhm.
to navigate and a very heavy burden at the beginning.
Yeah. Yeah. And so nutrition obviously is a really big consideration. Walk us through what a gluten-free diet looks like for families. And also, are there particular nutrients? You mentioned iron deficiency previously, but are there other nutrients that parents should be really hyper vigilant about?
Yes, yes. So the gluten-free diet looks like really making sure that you're adding in whole food nutrition. So fruits, veggies, gluten-free grains, meat, poultry, fish that are free of any additives. Very much just focusing on which foods are naturally gluten-free before adding in any gluten-free products, from the stores. And so in the gluten-free diet, there can be a lack of many nutrients. So that could be iron, zinc, vitamin D, calcium, B vitamins like B6, B12, folic acid. And so, to help fill in the nutrition gaps, I often encourage a gluten free multivitamin to help out because you're often dealing with these nutrient deficiencies that could be present, low appetite in kiddos, maybe low acceptance of new gluten free foods that they're not familiar with. And since we've removed wheat, barley, and rye from the diet, these were sources of many of the nutrients that I've stated already. Many fortified foods are not gluten-free, and so we really need to maximize their eating in the food offered and the foods that are offered so that they can get what is missing from these. So, another concern as well is that kids and teens with celiac disease can have a low fiber intake.
Mhm,
And so on a gluten-free diet, we really have to take special care to offer and introduce foods that are gluten-free and also are rich sources of key nutrients. So these foods will be gluten-free grains, of course, like quinoa, might be brown rice, amaranth, beans, lentils. It might be bean or lentil based pastas.
mhm.
Veggies might be seeds, nuts, meats and proteins. And so we also want to, take a look at the nutrition label and try to introduce foods that have a greater nutrition value. And a good example of that is when choosing a gluten free bread. Like maybe we can look at the ones that have more iron in them versus the ones that do not.
Yeah. Is iron deficiency a pretty common nutrient deficiency with celiac, particularly on diagnosis?
It is. In
Yeah.
fact, for many kiddos, they might be diagnosed with iron deficiency anemia that might signal the doctor to want to check for celiac disease too. So that
Mm,
often comes before it.
yeah. Yeah. So when a parent is out there navigating the grocery store, where, what foods might be sources of hidden gluten?
Yeah, great question. Because there are a lot of things that you might not really think of. Like it could be certain dressings, chicken broths, it might be soy sauce or teriyaki sauces, even certain candies can have gluten kind of hiding out. And even multivitamins can have wheat in them as well. So those are kind of some sneaky ones that parents might not realize. So reading labels is very crucial. And I will say too, especially when speaking about younger children, there are other non-foods that do contain gluten. One great example is Play-Doh. A lot of kids play with Play-Doh. That is a gluten-containing item. And so we really want to make sure that, especially for kiddos that are still putting their hands in their mouths, that we switch to a gluten-free alternative. Gluten can also be found in body products like shampoos, body washes, chapsticks. I know my daughter, there was gluten in her hair gel. We didn't know for quite a while, but she had some severe scalp itching for a long time. And there was one day I was doing her hair and I just glanced over and wheat protein was just glaring me in the face in front of that container. And I couldn't believe that I had overlooked that, but you don't think about it.
Yeah, yeah. I imagine that you, as well as other parents that might be navigating celiac disease with their children, you get your foods that you know work in the diet, but manufacturers can change their ingredients. In fact, they do it I wouldn't say often, but it's not uncommon for a manufacturer to change their ingredients. So, what advice do you have for parents regarding being vigilant with, reading those ingredient labels?
Yes, it's a great question. I would say just always get into the practice of being that like nutrition detective. Always be looking at the labels, even if they are the same foods that you often get, because you're right, they do change. And I think the other thing too is being a part of a Facebook community for celiac kids, because you'll have parents that will post, oh, here's a heads up, this label did change. And so I think that's really important too to stay in the know. Another thing too to do is to follow the gluten-free watchdog because she does a lot of reviews on different foods and she does testing for gluten in them as well. So I think it's also being a part of a page like that where you can have greater awareness of different products and what they have in them.
Yeah. I want to just circle back for a second on the cross contamination issue and having a kitchen at home that's partially gluten free or fully gluten free. Do you have a particular opinion on whether families should do 100% gluten free or partial? And does it base on, I mean, does age have anything to do with that?
Yeah, I think that the best decision is up to the family because every situation is so different. You may have some families that live in multi generational homes and they have to have a shared kitchen. You might have other families where they just have one child and that child has celiac disease. And so they can do an 100% gluten free kitchen. And then you have other families who have multiple kids and maybe two out of the six kids have celiac disease, so they may choose to do a split kitchen. And there's lots of other factors that come into play with that decision too. And finances is a big one because gluten-free products are more expensive. So I would always encourage families that to make that decision just based on their own family because it's definitely a personal decision and no right or wrong one for
Yeah.
sure.
Yeah. So kids love to snack. And I know parents are out there listening going, what am I doing for snacks? Do you have any recommendations for some like go-to gluten-free snacks that are friendly to kids?
Yes, I do. So some of our favorites, we are big fans of popcorn with olive oil and salt. We just love that as a snack. And lately, one of the big winners with my daughter has been making these gluten-free oatmeal energy bites. So you make them with gluten-free oats. And you use your favorite nut butter, chia seeds, honey, and chocolate chips. and they last for several days in the fridge. They're just really easy to pop out, and that has been a really, really great snack because it has some sustaining power, right? You've got the healthy
Yeah.
fats from the nut butters, you've got the oats for some added energy, and so those have been big ones.
Yeah.
But a couple other things we love are very just simple things. It might be cut up strawberries and some cream cheese. It
Uh-huh.
might be cucumber slices with cheese cubes. We love making like pumpkin muffins and things like that with our favorite gluten-free flour. So those kinds of things tend to go well for kiddos.
Yeah, when I opened my first private practice back in 2008 in Nashville, celiac and gluten-free diets were really, it wasn't that they were unheard of, but we were in that phase of transitioning from being hospitalized when you were diagnosed. So back in the 90s, when a child was diagnosed with celiac, it was a hospital stay, kind of like with diabetes, it was a
Wow.
hospital stay. And then in 2008, when I was in practice, it was not a hospital stay. It was you got your diagnosis and now you have to go see the dietitian and figure out your nutrition plan and figure out how to manage this. And at the time, um, you know, gluten-free products were few and far between.
Mm,
And the ones that were out there were really nutrient poor across the
mm,
board. So there have been amazing strides in the last couple of decades around making gluten-free foods available in the marketplace, um, and and making them also more nutritious. Have you found that to be true as well? As
absolutely. Absolutely. Because there still are many gluten-free products that are not fortified because they're not required to be. But I do find that there are more options available that are high in nutrients. Take gluten-free flour, for example. You can
Uh-huh.
definitely find gluten-free flours that do have added nutrition, just like other flours do. And so I think that that really does speak to the fact that things have changed in
Mhm.
the industry to make foods more nutritious for these kids.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So this idea that, you're deprived, or your child can't have the foods that every other child has or has access to. That's sort of a myth now, is that am I on the right track there, or is it still true that, children with celiac are their diets are not sort of as opportunistic, as children without celiac disease?
That's a great question. So when families get diagnosed, they are so fearful that their child will never live a normal life and that they will always go without. But the truth is, it's not true. There are so many ways for kids to still enjoy the same foods as their peers, but just the gluten-free options. And so that just it takes extra planning, but it definitely can happen once they learn how to do it the best way for their kids. And the industry has just boomed. I mean, there's all sorts of gluten-free products out there. I'm always amazed. I love going to different grocery stores because they all offer different types of gluten-free products. And I'm just always amazed of what's out there and what continues to be provided by these companies. So
Huh.
we've definitely come a long way. You no longer have to just be eating rice,
Yeah,
rice and rice cereal. There are lots of opportunities there for kiddos and very kid-friendly options at that. I
yeah,
think the biggest thing too is just understanding that that food is gonna taste different than the gluten-containing counterpart. And so, kids and their taste buds, there's always a learning curve there when they try something new. So I encourage parents, just give it time and try to have some patience when trialing out new things.
yeah. Just some personal questions. What foods do you wish were available or that somebody would make, or maybe you yourself, if you could make a food and bring it to market that was gluten-free, what would it be?
I love this question, Jill, because my daughter recently was just so upset because she misses goldfish and Cheez-Its, she said. And, it's funny because I always think that, she forgets what those things are like because she was diagnosed at 4, and so she didn't have all that much exposure, but she seems to remember and miss that very much, and so I would love if I could make it myself, I would, but I would love to make gluten-free goldfish and gluten-free Cheez-Its just so she and other kids can enjoy that again because that's one of the things where it's been very hard to find something that tastes similar
Mhm.
to that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And as a mom who is parenting a child with celiac disease, what are some of the greatest challenges that you face on a day-to-day
Yeah.
basis?
Yeah, great question. So it's definitely navigating social situations where we are invited to somebody's house for dinner. That's probably one of the bigger ones because you have to be okay, like in a place where you're comfortable with asking that person, what will be served, just so you can provide something similar. Often people will wanna go out of their way to make sure that she can feel included, and if that's the case, that's wonderful, but you really wanna ask a lot of questions about how food is prepared, and you might not even trust that they're gonna prepare the food the right way, and so that has been probably the trickiest part of it all, is just those social situations. Things have been easier just with navigating school, birthday parties. We're just in this habit of packing food pretty much always when we're leaving the house just in case. And so, yeah, that would definitely be my answer.
And I imagine at this point, your daughter is sort of accustomed to bringing food along, with her to these social situations, but I'm curious, how did you handle or have a conversation? Maybe you had a conversation, maybe you didn't, because she was pretty young when she was diagnosed, but how would you advise a family to manage these social situations aside from what they can do? How would they handle the conversation with their child? What might you say to a child to sort of frame out this, we have to bring our own food?
Yes, I think it starts with helping them understand what celiac disease is and what happens in their body when they are exposed to gluten. I feel like we really have to educate our kids on what's going on with their own bodies to really give that evidence or that reason behind why they can't have the birthday cake at the birthday party and why we're bringing our own cupcake instead. And so I think especially for younger kids, older kids too. There's a lot of books, children's books out there especially that do explain in a very fun way what's happening in the gut. Why does gluten cause these symptoms? And so I think we can help our kids understand maybe from like a safety perspective too, especially if they have symptoms like belly pain, and just letting them know that we're going to bring a food that's safe so your belly does not hurt, and that's why, we're gonna be eating differently. And so I love to try and help families teach their kids from a lens of abundance versus scarcity. So here are the things we're gonna add in so that you feel better, you have more energy, you have less pain, you have better sleep, versus talking about all the things that are being removed
Yeah.
instead, if that makes sense.
Oh, yeah, I think that could go for a child with food allergies also, that approach. I love the abundance approach. I feel like lately I've been talking about abundance versus scarcity with a lot of my private clients, and, I'm not sure if it's a side effect from just our culture and the fear of, um, food and certain types of food, and so we develop this sort of scarcity approach. Limit this, don't eat too much of that, you can't have any of this, and it in a child's mind, it really can create this psychological deprivation issue with food, and so abundance is really the way to counteract that.
I fully agree with that because the diagnosis in itself is very anxiety inducing, especially to focus on like all of the limits and all of the can't haves.
Mhm.
And we do see a need for a lot of psychological support for these kiddos and for families because ARFID and eating disorders, those things can also be associated.
Yeah. So, are there scientific breakthroughs in terms of treatment or medications for celiac, or is still the primary mode of treatment to avoid gluten?
Yes. So currently, the only treatment for celiac disease is to avoid gluten. But there are lots of research is happening in lots of places all over the world on celiac disease. And so, a couple things that might be on the horizon, but a lot of research is still needed. So, in Finland, they are studying a drug that may be used alongside a gluten free diet to help manage celiac disease. So that's exciting. Very, very new still. Also, a recent study came out last fall, I believe, and the study helped researchers better understand the role of the cells in the intestinal lining and how the gluten attack doesn't just happen to them, they actually have more of an active role in triggering this immune response we see from gluten, which is really interesting. So they have been found to sort of instigate this reaction and causing the immune cells to overreact to the gluten fragments.
Hmm.
And so that research and that information may be helpful for therapies that allow people, including children with celiac disease, to eat gluten without triggering harmful reactions. Now, that's still at the very beginning of research, but it's pretty amazing that we're learning more and more constantly that could make a big difference in the future of celiac disease and treatment.
Yeah. Wow. So, like food allergies, there's always, ongoing research and development. And just as a PSA for those of you listening, all of this research sometimes does change nutrition recommendations. Although for celiac, it's not changing those recommendations. A gluten-free diet and avoiding gluten is still the primary mode of treatment for celiac disease in children and in adults. As we sort of wrap this interview up, I know that several listeners would be interested in understanding and knowing what resources you recommend on this topic. And if you could share some of those, I'll include those in the show notes. But it would be great to hear what your feedback on that would be.
Yes. So the National Celiac Association has a program for kids. It's called ROC, which is an acronym. It stands for Raising Our Celiac Kids. They have many resources on their website, and they even keep a listing of gluten free summer camps for kids, which
Hmm.
is very exciting. Beyond Celiac has a great podcast, which is called Celiac Straight Talk for those who love podcasts like me. And a couple other resources would be the Celiac Foundation website, and then Boston Children's Hospital also has a great website. They have a podcast as well called Raising Celiac. So those would be the top ones.
That's my old alma mater,
Is it
Boston
really?
Children's. Yes, yes.
Awesome.
That's new since I was there. Okay, last question. What's the one thing you want every parent to know about celiac disease in children?
Yes. One thing I want them to know is that healing of the gut does take time. So you'll have some kids start a gluten-free diet and they might start feeling better pretty quickly, while others can take like 6 months to feel better. Some might take even longer. So it can be a slow process. I always tell parents too before diagnosis, if they do suspect something is wrong, to not give up on getting the answers that they're looking for.
Yeah, that's great advice. Where can people connect with you, Gabby, if they want to follow up with you or check out your resources?
Yes, so I run a free Facebook community for families called Gluten Free Made Easy for Celiac Kids. So you can find me there. I also have a freebie for your listeners. They can download it for more information on helping with that transition to gluten free living.
Awesome. Send me that. and I will post those links probably on the YouTube channel.
Okay. Yeah.
And folks, you can go over to YouTube and watch this video, or make sure you go to Apple Podcasts or your Android and listen in to the podcast. Thanks so much, Gabby, for coming on the show.
Jill, thanks so much for having me. This has been such an exciting conversation. I appreciate it.
Thanks, everyone, for listening to the Nourish Child podcast and this interview with Gabby Thompson about celiac disease. She has graciously given us 2 resources: my 4-step strategy for parents of newly diagnosed celiac kids to go gluten-free without feeling so overwhelmed. You can get that resource. It's a download digital guide. And you can also join Gabby's free Facebook community called Gluten-Free Made Easy for Celiac Kids. Those are 2 great resources. I will include those in the show notes over on YouTube. So you'll be able to find those links there, and you will also be able to find them on the Nourish Child, where there will be an article summary of this interview with Gabby, so you can find these resources there as well. My big announcement is that if you're a registered dietitian or a pediatrician or any healthcare professional who is working with children, I have a new audio course that I'm working on right now this summer for you around the topic of navigating the management of habits and health and well-being for children who are growing up in larger bodies. And with that audio course, which I will be applying for CEUs so that you can get credit for listening to it. But with that, and even independently, if you don't want that course, I will also be offering case consultation for healthcare providers and supervision. So if you're a dietitian out there working with children and you want somebody who is a sounding board for you, a supporter of your work, a guide to help you navigate the complexities of working with families and children, I can be that dietitian for you. So I will be setting up a more formal system and process for that, but you'll be able to go to my website, jillcastle.com, very soon and find a tab for professionals where you can check out my case consultation services, my supervision services, and any professional CEU products, courses available to you. I'll be working on those all summer. Hopefully they will be out and live before the end of the summer, but my target is definitely for the fall. Last, if you are a parent out there, you want one-on-one support, I do offer that. You can find more information over on the Nourish Child under consultations, or you can find it over on Jill Castle under my private practice tab. That's it for now, guys. I'll see you in 2 weeks with another episode on the Nourish Child. Until then, make sure you give that child in your life a loving squeeze today. Bye for now.
Thanks for listening to the Nourish Child podcast, where the #1 goal is to help you grow a nourished child inside and out.